I thank the representative of Mexico for her statement, and I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the Russian Federation. Colleagues, today we've had an intensive day from the point of view of discussions of the Ukrainian crisis. I won't repeat what I said this morning at the General Assembly. I can only state with regret that taking stock of the day, our signals to Kiev about the need to stop provocations against Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics were not heeded. It would appear that our Ukrainian colleagues, who recently have been actively armed and egged on by a host of states, are still harboring the illusion that, with the benediction of their Western sponsors, they will be able to achieve a military solution to the problem in the Donbass. Otherwise, it is difficult to explain the substantial intensification of shelling and acts of diversion on the territory of these republics. The Special Monitoring Mission of the OSCE recorded today almost 2,000 cases of violations of the ceasefire regime, including almost 1,500 explosions. Those living in Donetsk and Lugansk still sheltering in basements. The refugees are still flowing into Russia. In a word, the nature of the provocation by the Ukrainian military has not changed. You don't want to notice this, repeating the Ukrainian fairy tales that those living in Donetsk are all but shelling themselves. It is no surprise that the increasing suffering of those living in the Donbass does not seem to affect our Western colleagues. Through the whole day of debate today at the General Assembly, you haven't been able to find one word of compassion or condolences. It is as if these 4 million people for you simply don't exist. I would like to recall that the principle of sovereignty and territorial equality of states, and territorial integrity of states, in violation of which we are being accused of violating in Ukraine today, according to the Declaration on the Principles of International Law pertaining to friendly relations between peoples, adopted in 1970, they should be fully complied with as regards states who, and I quote, conduct themselves in compliance with the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and thus possessed of a government representing the whole people without distinction of race, creed, or color, the whole people living in that territory. End of quote. Today's government in Ukraine simply is not that. And the tragedy in Ukraine started indeed after the illegal coup in Maidan in 2014, when, rather than dialogue with the Russian-speaking citizens of Ukraine, the new authorities brandished guns and airplanes at them. Information and testimony to this end is more than sufficient. However, our Western colleagues prefer not to notice this. We tried yesterday and before yesterday, to explain to you the logic of the decision made by Russia to recognize the LPR and DPR. And we focused on the need to ensure peace and security there. However, you didn't want to hear this, and you don't want to hear it now. For you, those living in Donbass are simply pawns in a geopolitical game focused on weakening Russia and promoting the bloc from NATO to its borders. For us, these people are women, children, the elderly, who for 8 years have been cowering from Ukraine's shelling and provocations. For us, these are Ukraine people and not the Maidan authorities. And this is the difference in our approaches. If you do not change the geopolitical lens, you will never understand us. Then, those on whose behalf this decision I mentioned was made, who've not even thought about for over these 8 years, simply calling them pro-Russian separatists and terrorists. Those people are the most important for us. I'd like to say once again that the root of today's crisis around Ukraine is the actions of Ukraine itself, who for many years of sabotaging its obligations under the Minsk package of measures. Last week, even, there was a hope that Kiev would rethink and nevertheless implement what it signed up to do in 2015. For this, first and foremost, they needed direct dialogue with Donetsk and Lugansk. However, further confirmation that Ukraine is not ready for this type of dialogue and steps to grant Donbass special status as set forth in the Minsk agreements, while with the support of this position from Western backers, finally convinced us that we simply cannot force those living in the Donbass to suffer more. And as much as I already said, the Ukrainian provocation against with those in Donbass not only has not stopped, but has intensified, the leaders of the LPR and the DPR turned to us with a request to provide military support in line with bilateral cooperation agreements as agreed at the same time as they were recognition. This is a logical step, which is a consequence of the actions of the Ukrainian regime. During this meeting, the President of Russia, Putin, spoke with and said that he made a decision for a special military operation in the Donbass. We don't know all the details today, but briefly I would like to inform you that from his statement it says that the occupation of Ukraine is not in our plans. The aim of this special operation is to protect the people who, for over 8 years, have been suffering genocide from the Kiev regime. And for this, we will aim to demilitarize and de-genocide Ukraine, and also support those and hold accountable those who carried out so many crimes against civilians, including citizens of the Russian Federation. This decision was made in line with Article 51 of the UN Charter and the sanction of the Russian Federation and fulfilling the agreement on recognition of the LPR and DPR. We're receiving a lot of information and we will analyze this, and we will keep you up to speed with this. Now I resume my function as President of the Council, and I give the floor to the representative of Ukraine.
Well, distinguished members of the Security Council, Secretary General, Under-Secretary, before I try to deliver parts of the statement that I came here with tonight, most of it is already useless since 10 p.m. New York time. I would like to cite Article 4 of the UN Charter, and it says, membership in the United Nations is open to all other peace-loving states which accept the obligations contained in the present Charter and in the judgment of the organization are able and willing to carry out these obligations. Russia is not able to carry out any of the obligations. The ambassador of the Russian Federation 3 minutes ago confirmed that his president declared a war on my country. So before I read parts of my statement, I would like to avail of the presence of the Secretary General and request the Secretary General to distribute among the members of the Security Council and the members of the General Assembly the legal memos by the Legal Council of the United Nations dated December 1991, and in particular the legal memo dated 19th of December 1991. The one that we've been trying to get out of the Secretariat for a very long time, and we were denied to get it. The Article 4, paragraph 2 of the Charter reads, the admission of any such state to membership in the United Nations will be affected by a decision of the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. Mr. Secretary General, please instruct the Secretariat to distribute among the members of the Security Council and the members of the General Assembly a decision by the Security Council dated December 1991 that recommends that the Russian Federation can be a member of this organization, as well as a decision by the General Assembly dated December 1991 where General Assembly welcomes the Russian Federation to this organization. It would be a miracle if the Secretariat is able to produce such decisions. There is nothing in the Charter of the United Nations about continuity as a sneaky way to get into the organization. So when I was coming here an hour ago or so, I was intending to ask the Russian ambassador to confirm on the record that the Russian troops will not start firing at Ukrainians today and go ahead with the offensive. It became useless 48 minutes ago. Because about 48 minutes ago, your president declared the war on Ukraine. So now I would like to ask the ambassador of the Russian Federation to say on the record that at this very moment, your troops do not shell and bomb Ukrainian cities, that your troops do not move in the territory of Ukraine. You have a smartphone, you can call Lavrov right now. We can make a pause to let you go out and call him. If you are not in a position to give an affirmative answer, the Russian Federation ought to relinquish responsibilities of the President of the Security Council, pass these responsibilities on to a legitimate member of the Security Council, a member that is respectful of the Charter, and I ask the members of the Security Council to convene an emergency meeting immediately and consider all necessary draft decisions to stop the war. Because it's too late, my dear colleagues, to speak about de-escalation. Too late. The Russian president declared the war on the record. Should I play the video of your president? Ambassador, shall I do that right now, or you can confirm it? Do not interrupt me, please. Thank you.
Then don't ask me questions when you are speaking. Proceed with your statement.
Anyway, you declared the war. It is the responsibility of this body to stop the war. So I call on every one of you to do everything possible to stop the war. Or should I play the video with your president declaring the war? Thank you very much.
Again, I must say that I thank the representative of Ukraine for his statement, and the questions, I wasn't planning to answer them because I've already said all I know at this point. Waking up Minister Lavrov at this time is not something I plan to do. You said the information that we have will be something we provide. And this isn't called a war, this is called a special military operation in the Donbass. I now give the floor to the representative of Germany.
Mr. President, we meet at the very moment of a military escalation we have not experienced in Europe for over a generation's time. The President of the Russian Federation announced a military operation on Ukrainian territory. We condemn this in the strongest possible terms. And we call upon all members of the Security Council and the United Nations to now stand up for Ukraine and against a shameless breach of international law. 2 days ago, Russia's decision to recognize the self-proclaimed so-called People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk was harshly rejected in this council. It had already dealt a devastating blow to the principles and the international order that the United Nations stand for. Russia has not listened, and it turns out it was not prepared to listen. It has continued its massive military buildup, and we observed and observe cyber attacks directed against Ukraine and now Russian military is moving into Ukrainian territory. By the actions and this unprovoked military operation, Russia is violating the core principles of the UN Charter. We condemn the use of force against innocent people and the violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine in the strongest possible terms. We urge Russia to terminate its military action against Ukraine immediately and withdraw its troops. Mr. President, our thoughts are with the Ukrainian people. We will be steadfast in our support for Ukraine and our support for the UN Charter. The Russian aggression will come at an unprecedented price politically, economically, and morally. Mr. President, France, Ukraine, and my country stood ready for diplomacy, for another meeting in the Normandy format, or for the summit that Ukraine had proposed. With our allies and partners, we called on Russia to seek a diplomatic way forward in vain. Now is the moment to speak up and defend the international order of the UN Charter against unilateral aggression, jointly and decisively. Tonight, we stand with Ukraine, and we are doing so unwavering and determined. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Germany for her statement. And now I give the floor to the United States, who wish to make a further statement.
Thank you. In my remarks tonight, I said that we predicted Russia's false flag attacks, the misinformation, the theatrical emergency meetings, and the cyber attacks. But one piece had not come to pass. Unfortunately, while we've been meeting in the Security Council tonight, it appears that President Putin has ordered that last step. At the exact time as we are gathered in the Council seeking peace, Putin delivered a message of war in total disdain for the responsibility of this Council. This is a grave emergency. The Council will need to act, and we will put a resolution on the table tomorrow. As President Biden said tonight, Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring, and the United States and our allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and now I'd like to give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom, who asked to make a further statement.
Thank you. As we sat in this chamber urging Russia to step back, President Putin announced special military operations on Ukrainian territory. This is unprovoked and unjustified. This is a grave day for Ukraine and for the principles of the United Nations. We and our partners have been clear that there will be consequences for Russia's actions. We fully support the United States' call for a UN Security Council resolution. This Council must do all it can to stop the war and uphold the Charter. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom, and now I'll give the floor to the representative of Albania, who also wished to make a further statement.
Dear colleagues, we could not end this meeting that what we had feared and anticipated since days is happening. Explosions are reported in Kiev and in several other cities in Ukraine. Mosques are finally down and tanks are in. As we speak, Russia is implementing its plan and attacking a neighbor to whom it has decided to deny existence, freedom, the land, dignity, and life. We call on all the members of the United Nations to rally in support of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, to stand with Ukraine and its people to condemn firmly and unequivocally this aggression, to stand for peace, for rules, for international law, and take whatever measures they deem necessary to show the aggressor that its actions will bear consequences. Let me reiterate, Russia will be held responsible for the consequences of an unprovoked war, for the loss of human lives, for causing unbearable human pain, and for opting for destruction when we need development, for bringing death where we aspire for need and for hope, for choosing to become an outlaw when we need cooperation. Russia will bear historical blame and shame and the consequences of invading a neighboring country and attempting to destroy European security. Let's unite and make sure it will not succeed. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Albania, and I now give the floor to the representative of France for a further statement.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
au moment où nous nous réunissions en urgence,
at the time when we were in an emergency meeting to try to prevent the worst and from war breaking out, we all learned that the President of the Russian Federation had coordinated a special military operation in Donbass, and that Russia will do its utmost to demilitarize Ukraine. Russia has therefore chosen war. France condemns, in the strongest possible terms, the initiation of these operations. This decision, announced at the very moment when the Council was meeting, shows the disdain that Russia has for international law and for the United Nations. Russia must be accountable to the Security Council. For this reason, France will join its partners in this Council, and in the hours to come, will prepare a resolution condemning the war conducted by Russia. We call on all members of this Council to support us. Under these tragic circumstances, we call on the Russian Federation to respect international humanitarian law, no matter what the circumstances. We call for the protection and respect of all civilians, including particularly vulnerable persons, women, children, and humanitarian personnel. Thank you, sir.
I thank the representative of France, and I give the floor now to the representative of Ireland to make a further statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. When I spoke earlier, I said that the path for diplomacy and the path for dialogue was perilously narrow, and I didn't realise, in fact, how narrow and indeed how close to the precipice we really were just over an hour ago. We now see that that path has been closed by the announcement of military aggression on the part of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. That is something that we roundly condemn. We stand with the people of Ukraine tonight, with every man, woman and child who is seeing this news as we did, as we sat here in the chamber, and whose lives are at risk. We believe it is now time indeed for this Council to stand up and assume its responsibility and to speak out in the strongest possible terms about this act of aggression. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Ireland, and I now give the floor to the representative of Ukraine to make a further statement.
Well, as I said, relinquish your duties as a chair. Call Putin, call Lavrov to stop aggression. And I welcome the decision of some members of this Council to meet as soon as possible to consider the necessary decision that would condemn the aggression that you launch on my people. There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell, Ambassador.
I wanted to say in conclusion that we aren't being aggressive against the Ukrainian people, but against the junta that is in power in Kiev. There are no more speakers on the list. This meeting is adjourned.
All right, so you've been watching live pictures there of that extraordinary second emergency UN Security Council meeting in New York. It was called earlier by Ukraine following the separatist leaders in Ukraine calling for Russian military help.